part of this Maamar in the year Tavshin Chav Ches, end of 1967, on Parshas Vayeshev. It's following two Maamarim on the 14th of Kislev and the Yutes Kislev about the concept of Chesed of Avram versus the Chesed of Yishmael and the connection between Yosef and Eisav. So let's bring up the text. Hopefully we can finish it tomorrow. We'll see. Okay, we're holding Sif Gimlach. The question is, we're trying to talk about the difference between Chesed Bilvar, the outside Chesed, and Chesed Lagav, which is the source. Basically, Chesed is we said before that Chesed is an expression of humility. Both humility on the person. Avram says, I'm dust and ash from receiving Chesed. It means I'm humbled by the Chesed God gives me, and this is based on the Ketointi, which is the first Maamar that Rebbe spoke, which is based on the letter the Alter Rebbe wrote on his today's Chav Cheshvan. So Yom Tov, this is the letter that the Alter Rebbe wrote after being released from prison, that the Chesed that Hashem showed in the story of Yitas Kislev should bring humility as opposed to gaiva, ego of the Chesidim, from the Chesidim. So the Rebbe quoted in the Maamar, in the letter Ketointi, the concept that Avram says that Anochi offer ve'efer, I'm humble, I feel like dust and earth from the kindness Hashem showed me. And we said that the level of kindness that is felt by the receiver, the recipient of the chesed, is also mirrored by the humility of the mashpi, of the giver of chesed. That's within the attributes of chesed. But there is the concept of l'cha Hashem hagedula, which is the idea of where chesed is a manifestation of greatness as opposed to humility. And the question is, how does that go together with chesed of Avram, the chesed of humility, the chesed from the world of Tikkun? And what we're going to learn is basically that the idea is to tap into the energy of Gedula, of the greatness of Chesed, the Chesed that comes out of the space of Seder Shtalshlis, and to be able to guide it through humility, through Bittul, to tap into the projected level of Chesed, meaning where a person projects themselves with Chesed, but in a way of humility as opposed to a way of ego, both in the giving side and on the receiving side. So, but now first we're going to define what is Chesed of Yishmael. That Yishmael actually feels that the more Chesed Yishmael gets, the more Yishmael's ego is bloated. Look how great I am that God gives me. And therefore it's also tapping into an energy of Gedula, which is basically siphoning in a negative way because there's a lack of bittul from the level of Gedula, which is a projective, where it's projecting Chesed as opposed to in a way of the feeling of humility. Therefore I'm giving Chesed. Now the question is, when we have to understand. How does Avram, what's the chesed of Yishmael? The chesed of Yishmael is a descendant of Avram. So if Avram was a chesed, and like we said, the definition of chesed kedusha was based on the foundation that both the receiver and the giver is in a feeling of humility. So how is Yishmael, who is an offshoot of Avram, does he tap into the energy of Chesed in a negative way, which is all about building up an ego? Even though we use the word Yotze, means that Yishmael separates himself. He goes out of Avraham. And Yishmael leaves Avram, so to say, and as a way, the negative, so to say, this negative energy leaves Avram, and he remains negative, and therefore, you could say because of that, he's tapping into an energy of an egotistic Chesed kindness, going out of Avram. Nevertheless, it's still Yotze Mimenu, means something that comes from Avram is connected to Avram. Yes, it separates itself from Avram, but that means that Avram had to have within him this negative element of Chesed, otherwise Yishmael wouldn't have it. So Yitzchak Shiyatzu Mimenu Eisav. So here we say like this. What do you mean, sir? We're going to talk about, so to say, the fathers who've had negative offspring. It's not just limited to Avram. Yitzchak also has Eisav. And it says Yitzchak Shiyatzu Mimenu Eisav. So does it Yitzchak have this negativity of Eisav? So it says it's different because the attributes of Avram and the attributes of Yitzchak are different. The attribute of Yitzchak because Yitzchak is severity. And severity, the Rebbe says, too severe, too much gevura, but tzimtzumim, and too much contraction. The gevura also is to limit, contracting the revelation, being grounded, but too grounded, so then you could create a space for a unika, for a siphoning of lumazah. because the character of chesed is a character that's limiting. So if it's limiting, part of the idea of dinim, judgment, rules, boundaries is all from gvura. So too much of that could be gvura of negativity, and therefore it could give off a negative outcome, which is Eisav. But Abraham, that's all Yitzchak. Abraham shenyani chesed, but Abraham was chesed. Hashpah or Regila. Abraham is all about revealing that it's a chesed, there's a light. So how could it reveal then from that revelation create negativity? Means when you create a void, you could make a too strong of a void, and therefore it could be too much, and therefore there's such a void that there's an empty space called Eisav that allows for Eisav. But if I'm projecting, if I'm a mashpi, I'm chesed, it's a revelation in Gilui. How is from there comes the negativity of Yishmael? How does it allow for a space of negativity? The idea of gevura, too much gevura, for instance, we find the idea why it's similar to the idea of why Ser, the Isha and Erva, too much woman's hair, because if hair is also an idea of tzimtzum. And Chassidus explains that hair is like it's so limited. It's like the fact that you could cut hair, although it's siphoning off energy from the body, it's growing. Otherwise, it wouldn't grow. So if it's growing, it means it has life. If it has life, but it should have feelings. Why, when you cut the hair, is there no pain? Because it's so disconnected. And because it's so disconnected, although that represents the concept of tzimtzum, but too much tzimtzum could also create a negativity. Therefore, a woman covers her hair because she's gvura. And if it would be too much gvura, then there could be a place for negativity. So out of Yitzchak could come Eisav. But how could it come? How could you have from Chesed projecting itself in a Gili revelation, and he's humble? So how does the humility and restrained and balanced Chesed of Avram allow for a space of Yishmael? The idea is there's one thing here. Avram wasn't Tamim yet, right? When does Avram become complete? Only after he's circumcised. After he has a bris milah. Yishmael was born before the bris milah, right? Yishmael is 13 years old when Avram circumcises himself and Yishmael, and therefore Yishmael came from an incomplete Avram, and therefore there's a space for negativity. Therefore, because it's before the time of before the milah, then Avram still had kind of this chaotic part within himself as well. The Alpaim Shana of Teyu was, I guess, until Avram was circumcised. We say that the world trends with the first 2,000, and then from Avram starts the 2,000 years of Torah. And when's the 2,000 years of Torah? Maybe it's at that point of the Bris Milah. And before then, we're still in the space of Tayu, of chaos, and there's the Chesed of chaos still is a projected, it doesn't have the element of humility, and it's the Chashem HaGdula, the idea of Gdula feeling great. So at that point, Yishmael could come out. Chesed Lumsa, which gives space, that Yishmael taps into that Gedula, and therefore it projects, or he reflects the ego in himself in a negative way. Because when the vessels of the world of chaos broke and fell down, and that was the source of negative, what's the idea of Shviras HaKelim, breaking of the vessels, because there's light in Chesed, and the broken vessels of the world of Teyu, of Chesed, of the world of chaos. So let's continue down. So, and because in that time Avram was still also part of the world of Teyu, of chaos, he hasn't yet completed himself, which would have been the idea of circumcision, which is the idea of circumcision. So at that point, Yishmael was able to siphon off the negative energy of Chesed. And therefore Yishmael takes the idea of Gedula, the idea of the Chesed of Tayyub, because Gedula itself is not a bad problem. The idea of greatness within Chesed is not a problem, but it's a problem when it's broken, and therefore you only have the greatness without the focus that this greatness is greater than you, and therefore Yishmael only feels great about himself because of the Chesed, which is the Tachlis Hagasus Vayeshes. It's all about the coarseness and the ego, the Chulu, etc. Even we can understand this better based on the teaching of the Or Chaim HaKadosh on the Torah, which he says, he asked the question, which is the question, I think we've asked this question before. How is it that on the chariot of the Merkava, of the chariot that Yecheskel sees, so to say, the image of the Seder Stalshus, you see that the lion's to the right and the ox is to the left. Right is higher than left, right? So it's more, like we say in the Pesach Elio, the right extends longer. And in this world, the lion is a non-kosher animal and the ox is a kosher animal. So if the lion is on the right, which is the higher side, how is it in this world? The lion is a non-kosher animal. So the Aruch HaKadosh asked this question. The Inyan Ha'ari, with regard to the lion, Shuchai Tami, that is an impure animal. Bilo Ashar, the ox is a behemoth Torah, is a kosher animal, a pure animal. Similarly, he asked the question, the lion is to the right, small, and again, the right is greater than the left. As we know in Judaism, right is stronger than left. Very small, like we say, the weaker hand is the left hand for the righty. Shows a weakness, which is not just physical weakness, also weakness and less connected to the source. And if Ari is on the right side, how's it an unkosher and non-kosher animal, the impure animal in this world? So if the lion's on the right, the lion's greater than the ox. So why when they come in this world, the actual physical lion? The lion is a non-kosher animal, but the ox is a pure kosher animal. So the Aruch HaKadosh answers. She understands that's the point. The kibbush b'nei Ari Yulam Yosef, because its source is higher, that it's on this right side of the chariot. So what's higher could follow. Therefore, when it falls and breaks and separates from holiness, it falls further. It falls further. The laws of gravity will be situated in luminous, and therefore could go all the way into impurity. As we know, the rule is whatever is higher, if it falls and when it falls, falls further down. That the ability. Where's the ability to go further down? Now, it's not always a negative, meaning the idea that something that's higher falls lower. So if it falls and disconnects, of course it's going to fall lower. But there's even a way to connect to your height, and the higher you are, the further you could penetrate while you're still staying connected. In the case of the lion, it's a broken pieces, so therefore it's not connected, and it falls further into Tumah, but remains there. But there's also the rule that if you're starting from above, from a high place, and can stay connected, you could penetrate and transform deeper, like we find the example given in Chassidus about a teacher. The teacher who understands the material better could simplify it more, meaning to say, when you have a person talking that talks complicated, right, saying a complicated idea, and everyone's like, I have no idea what this person is saying. It's not necessarily a sign that that person understands it better than this teacher who could get up and give a lecture and simplify something. The ability to simplify something is because you have such a grasp of the concept that you could even put it in simple terms. It's the less knowledgeable, less smart, less person who has a grasp on the concept is limited to how simple they can simplify it. And that's why we say that's King Solomon, the smallest of all people, was able to say 3,000 examples in Shalom. Why? Because he understood it so deep and he had it from such a high source, he was able to go so low, even into the space where typically it was not a regular person could not give 3,000, so to say, examples. Okay, so therefore, but that's if it's connected, also could go further down. And if it's disconnected, surely it's going to fall further down. Yidua Klal says no. If it falls, meaning because it's coming from so high, therefore it could go so low. And the idea that the alpha became. So something actually that's so high could fall so low, and not in a way that it disappears, but because it's so high, it could even remain. So in the case of the lion, a lion that's unkosher is not pure. In this world, there's a physical lion that's impure because it comes from such a high source. Again, there's a kind of a little bit going back and forth between going from so high and affecting so low, and so high and falling so low. It's not the exact same thing. Falling is you lose control. That's a sign of disconnect. Penetrating low is also an idea that something that's so high could penetrate deeper in. And we find that many times in Torah, the idea of the mitzvahs are so high, therefore we're doing them in physicality as opposed to avavira, love and fear, which is an emotion, doesn't go as far as the ma'aseh, the action of the mitzvah. Okay. That's why the ikr is the ma'aseh, the idea is the action of the mitzvah, because the idea is to bring it even lower, penetrate further into creation. But again, here we're talking about falling low. And when does it stay in its negativity as far as it falls? And therefore, it's coming from so high, it falls so low, and it turns into an unkosher animal. Because it's coming from so high, and it kind of in that transition of disconnect, the darkness is so dark that it remains an entity of unkosher. The ox, because it's coming from a lower place, can't fall so low. So therefore, the ox comes in this world, it stays as a kosher animal. And therefore, the powers that, so to say, are siphoning off the lion as it falls and disconnects are stronger, and therefore can conceal it, the light more, and therefore allow for a non-kosher animal. Had there not been this great concealing, because the lion is so high, so if the powers that are kind of concealing it wouldn't be so strong, then the light would remain and they would transform it. It wouldn't allow it to be an entity. The fact that it stays an entity is because it takes a strong concealment to fight against the power of the high lion. So it's because it's so high, so then whatever is attaching itself to it has to be stronger. And therefore it's so strong that it comes down and manifests in this world in a non-kosher animal. Therefore, the line that comes from so high, it comes from the right side, which you said is higher than the left side. Yeah, but because of the breaking of the vessels, and it disconnects, and therefore attaches itself to impurities, the impurities are so strong, it falls even further, and it goes into a space where it remains, yet it's concealed. The lumas in the opposite side, and it becomes a non-kosher animal. But the ox, because it's not from such a high place, it comes from the left side. It's not as high as the line. If it falls, it doesn't fall so low. It remains a kosher animal. Yes, it's physical. Yes, it's not guaranteed you could eat it. Right? A kosher, a shor has the possibility to be kosher. It still requires shchita. It still requires not to be a treifa. Meaning to say, it's still also to fall in. It's from the world of chaos. But it's from the world of chaos in this staying in the realm of klipas noga. Because again, if a non-Jew slaughters or whatever, the meat comes in. If you walk into a non-kosher store and you pick up a steak, you can't say, well, it's a kosher animal. It is a kosher animal, but now it's no longer permissible for you to eat because of the way it passed away, the way it died, the way it was killed, etc., etc. But at least if it would have been a kosher animal, meaning to say that it was slaughtered properly and it wasn't a treif, and Allah says and Torah says that this animal is kosher, then it becomes permissible. It remains permissible. Well, it becomes permissible because the idea of shechita is to elevate it, to make it permissible. Okay. Well, there are some of means it has the ability to become permissible. Well, there are some of Kislev result, so to the Ari says, similar to what he quotes from the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Why, again, this is a question we've gone to many times, that the Arizal quotes, why is it that a person needs to sustain themselves, he or her, from domem tzemeach chai, means you need, domem would be lifeless things like stones, right, that create your shelter. Tzemeach could also be to create your shelter, whether it's wood, or tzemeach could also mean vegetation, which means you eat it, you internalize it. Chai, it also creates protection, whether it's clothing from the hides, or eating it that gives you life. Right. So why does a person need to sustain themselves and protect themselves in this world from the domim tzmeachai? And a person also has an utterance from God. Nasa Adam. So the question is, why do we need why are we dependent on the lower elements of light of domim, things that are still like stones, things that grow and things that are alive, meaning animals? So the answer, like the Arizal says, and we've learned this many times, is the fishesh that keep in the tail, because from their source, their origin, within the world of chaos, they're much higher, and therefore, when the person who's from the world of tikkun, from fixing, it's similar to the same vision that Yecheskel saw, right? Yecheskel sees that there's a chariot, and on the chariot is the image of man, and that it says that the chayis are noises umenusois, they carry and they're carried. Meaning they carry the person. The person's dependent on the animals. like a person is dependent on a horse and buggy to get you further, but there's no direction. If the horse and buggy just ride, there's no direction. You need to direct the horse and buggy. So then you have a combination of the other matikun. So therefore it says the animals carry the person, the image of the person, and munusais, they get carried from the structure. But the power to carry comes from the animal. The force is from the animal itself. So too in the word of God, the nitzus, the spark that's within the animal, or even the domem that creates your shelter, is strong enough to even protect the person. The person's dependent on it. Mashenkin Adam, the person, although he has the utterance, or she, and also has from the world of Tayu, but just like the ox remains kosher, so too the animal within the human is not on the level of the animal, so to say, within the animal itself, and therefore we need to eat the animal to sustain ourselves, and the same rule presents itself to the vegetation and domem, the lifeless things. Okay. Let's go a little further. Let's see how big Dalet is. If it's not too long, let's see. Yes, let's try to finish Dalet. Okay. In this, we could try to possibly finish the Maamar tomorrow. Okay, Dalet. Nisbar, we explained before. So in the previous Maamar, when he means the previous Maamar, he means the Maamar of Padim Shalom from that same year, which is 1967. So we explained that although that yes, the world of chaos comes before the world of tikkun, and therefore we sustain ourselves from the higher things from the world of tayu, meaning like animals and vegetation, etc. Nevertheless, tikkun mevar tayu. Without tikkun, there's no structure. Who's mevar? Who has the ability to refine and direct tayu is only the world of tikkun. Example again given would be used many times as a coach and a player, right? So you have the coach. The player has the talent. Possibly, you can have a coach that has zero talent, couldn't play a minute on the field. But without the coach, the player has no ability to perform, and all the talent would go to waste. Who could direct and show and guide the player's talent to perform is the ability to have a proper coach, and that's like the idea of tikkun. That although there's a power of tayu, but tayu has no value, no structure, no direction without tikkun, the world of fixing. And so now he says, now here the Rebbe goes into another thing. It's not just that the person has this know-how, so to say, of directing tayu, that the world of tikkun has the know-how how to fix it, but the ability that it has to direct it is because really tikkun is higher than tayu. It means it's a sandwich in levels. In the way we see things in Seder Hishtalshus, in the world of in the system of creation, yes, the world of tayu, chaos comes before tikkun. The kings of Eisav are before the kings of Yehuda, of Yaakov. Again, this is why we're coming to why Yosef is needed in order to give security to Yaakov. That was the question we had. Why do we say that Yaakov was concerned when he saw Toihu was higher, and only when Yosef was born that the lahava that comes from Yosef calmed Yaakov down. So this is we're trying to answer that question. So he says, although that Toihu is higher than Tikkun, but really the ability that Tikkun has to direct and structure tayu is because he says even the root of tikkun is higher than the root of tayu. Hidu as is known. In Yaakov Eisav, we have Yaakov and Eisav, which is the question that we have at hand. Yaakov is intimidated by the kings of Eisav. What's the world of Yaakov? The world of fixing structure. The world of Eisav is the world of chaos. Although the prophet says that Yaakov and Eisav are brothers, and in the world of Makiv, both of them are the same, and there's even an argument you could say that Eisav is a Ach Yaakov, and Yitzchak chooses Eisav, but in the Pnimis of Makiv, and the Pnimis always was Yaakov. Because Yaakov, I love Yaakov and I hate Eisav. Even though outwardly they're brothers, but if you go to Pnimis and Makiv, and even the Makiv is encompassing energy, and in theory, encompassing energy shouldn't differentiate, and definitely shouldn't choose Yaakov over Eisav. But even Makiv is connected to the essence, and in the essence, there's never a question. Like we said before, the essence of the neshama of the Yid is connected. The world was created after Al Yisrael, Al Machshava. Number one comes the Jewish people, and every manifestation and every energy, as great as it may be, is secondary to Yisrael. And therefore, at the end of the day, it's Yaakov Dafka. And therefore, Yaakov is not intimidated by Eisav. That's what the Rebbe is getting to. The Fisha Sharish Atiknu L'Maal Meteo, because at the root, at the essence of Makiv, the Pnimis over there, it's all about the tikkun, not about the chaos. And the proof is what the effect tikkun could have on Teyu. Because at its root is higher. It's more than that, he says. The Rebbe says, and when specifically, when tikkun fixes the structure, fixes the chaos, becomes the proper elevation. When the name of Hashem in the number value of 45, and again how you use the letters, is elevates, so to say, the world of tikkun, which is the ban, which is the world of the animal, right? Mem hey is behema. So beis mem hey beis be hey ma is, so it's hey and hey is 10, and the mem is 40, is 50, and the beis is 52. So the name of Hashem, beis nun, which is 52 of the world of chaos, is the world of the animal. Nevertheless, as I misal shem ban the shem sag, then the behema gets elevated from the number 52 to the number 63. I'm not going to get into details. Again, that's one of the names of Hashem as it's spelled out in the value of 63, which means that the teyu doesn't just get fixed, but it also gets elevated. And then you have the level of chesed l'gai atzma. This is what he's getting at. That we said before that there's gedula. So we said that chesed of tikkun is humility. Chesed of teyu is gedula, is greatness. But the real chesed of greatness is the way behema teyu gets elevated to 63, which then it's the proper chesed. It's chesed, but in a way of greatness. Moshe is part of, as we said, there's two ways of saying this great chesed. It means that seemingly the chesed that doesn't have humility. That there's the greater chesed gets revealed gets brought down through the chesed that starts off in a bitteldik way, which is outside. Meaning to say, should be gilui hurak chesed levar. That means the idea is that it should just be how chesed comes in a structured way, which is the chesed of bittul. The second way is that we have the gedula, the chesed, not that the chesed gets brought down only through, so to say, the bittul, which we're going to say it remains the bittul, but it's bittul with gedula. But there's actually the gedula itself, the greatness, the chashem gedula gets revealed itself. Then Mashiach comes. Then the time Mashiach, and the moon will be like the sun, meaning to say that the limitations, or seemingly, which is the humility of the moon, is going to shine itself like the sun, which is great. V'nikeva to save Geber, and the female, which is now the makabel, is going to be surrounding the masculine. Gam kol kala. That's what we say when Mashiach comes. We say kol kala, and the woman doesn't stay silent. Today, the man says Hariyat Mukadeshasli. The man engages the woman, marries the woman stays silent because she's the receiver. But when Mashiach comes, we're going to have kol chasen v'kol kala. The woman also is going to have a voice. But even samech chasen ima kala, that the chasen and kala are equal. The bride and the groom are equal. Shaydei kala hu samech chasen. And on the contrary, not only that the bride is going to give joy to the chasen, and not just the chasen giving joy to the groom, just giving joy to the bride, but the bride also adding to the groom. The Rebbe says this so too when it comes to Yud Tes Kislev. When we have miracles, you have sometimes chesed. Hashem gives miracles through chesed, but it only filters through the chesed of bittul. And how does that come out as in a miracle? Then you have miracles that are concealed. You don't even know there's a miracle. It looks like Purim, right? Achashverosh is the king, he has a wife, but it's all teva. It seems natural. That's what happens. What else should happen? Who's he going to listen to? How many listens to Esther? But when the chesed, the great chesed comes through, it doesn't have to be filtered and brought through teva, through nature. Then we have miracles that are greater than nature. The Rebbe says it's a miracle beyond nature. It wasn't enclosed in nature. But nevertheless, the point is not that the gedula, the miracle that breaks nature, should bring ego. It remains that bittul. Sometimes we're fearful. If a person feels great chesed, you may have ego, like the chesed of Bishmal. But no, the idea is that you remain bittul. Like the Rebbe would say, "Oyres the teyum keil the tikkun." You have this great light, the light of unlimited chesed, an expression of chesed, miracles that break the laws of nature. But the effect on the person stays. And how does it come down? Is because the person stays focused, and the focus is to be bottled to the rotzen, to the want of Hashem. Mashkasev Marim Kodesh, the greatness, Marim, what's great and holy, and it begins Gedula, Ha'atzmis, the real great Gedula. The Chashem Gedula, Chesed L'Gav, the greater Chesed. How is it Eshkon? How is it Sheikh? And how is it rest? And the humility. So here we have the idea of pairing together. Not just that humility matches humility, but humility matches greatness. And therefore the Alter writes that after the victory of Yitas Kislev, on the contrary, although you see a miracle that's beyond nature, the effect has to be greater humility, not less humility. All right, Be'ezus Hashem, we will continue the class tomorrow and hopefully finish the Maamar.